In 1942, something catastrophic was happening in the skies over Germany. The United States had committed to the most ambitious bombing campaign in human history. American factories were producing thousands of B-17 Flying Fortresses and B-24 Liberators, four-engine heavy bombers designed to carry massive bomb loads deep into Nazi territory. The strategy was sound. Destroy German factories, oil refineries, airfields, and railroad yards from the air, and Germany cannot continue the war. But there was one problem nobody anticipated. These bombers were dying. Not from flak. Not from accidents. They were being hunted and slaughtered by German fighter planes. A single German Me-109 or FW-190 could attack a formation of bombers. The bomber crews would see the German fighters diving out of the sun. They would open fire with their machine guns. Sometimes they would hit a German fighter. Sometimes the German fighter would break off the attack. But often, very often, the German fighter would not break off. It would press its attack, weaving through the bomber formation, firing its cannons and machine guns. A B-17 would explode. Another B-17 would catch fire. Men would die. Parachutes would open. Other men would not get out. They would stay in the aircraft all the way down. On a single bombing raid in October 1943, American bombers lost 60 aircraft. That was 600 men dead, captured, or wounded. In a single day, American pilots who flew the B-17 began calling their aircraft flying coffins. Morale among bomber crews was collapsing. Families across America received telegrams. The mothers and wives understood immediately. This war was killing their sons. This war was killing their husbands. American military leadership understood the situation was unsustainable. If bomber losses continued at this rate, the entire strategic bombing campaign would fail. The aircraft were available. The pilots were available. The crews were available. But the losses were too high. Generals knew that something had to change. But what? The solution came from an unexpected place. The British Air Ministry had contracted North American Aviation to produce a fighter aircraft to British specifications. The company designed an aircraft called the P-51. The early versions were disappointing. Pilots complained the aircraft was slow. Pilots complained it was sluggish in combat. The aircraft had potential, but the engine was the limiting factor. Someone, historians are not certain who, suggested installing a British Rolls-Royce Merlin engine into the P-51 airframe. The Merlin was already powering the legendary British Spitfire fighter. It was a proven, powerful engine. When North American Aviation received permission to make this modification, they did so. They installed a Packard-built Rolls-Royce Merlin engine into the P-51 fuselage. They made other modifications. They improved the canopy. They refined the fuel system. They tested the aircraft. What they discovered was extraordinary. The P-51 Mustang could fly 438 miles per hour. That was faster than contemporary German fighter aircraft. But that was only part of the story. The P-51 had an operational range of 1,000 miles. That meant it could fly from England to targets in Germany and back to England. With drop tanks attached to the wings, the range increased to 1,300 miles. This was revolutionary. The P-47 Thunderbolt, an excellent American fighter, had a range of about 400 miles. The P-51 could fly more than twice as far. American bombers flying to targets deep inside Germany would have fighter protection all the way to the target and all the way back home. For the first time, bomber crews would have what they called their little friends. Bomber crews would have fighters protecting them. The P-51 was armed with 6.50 caliber machine guns. Each gun could fire 700 rounds per minute. In 1 second of continuous fire, a P-51 could deliver 1,050 bullets. German fighters typically carried 2 or 3 machine guns, usually firing smaller caliber rounds. When a P-51 opened fire on a German fighter, the German aircraft would simply be torn apart. The damage was catastrophic. Pilots trained to control their aircraft would suddenly find the control surfaces shredded. The fuselage would be punctured with dozens of holes. The aircraft would no longer fly. It would fall. German pilots flying Me-109s and FW-190s understood what a P-51 burst of gunfire could do. German pilots began to fear the P-51. The first P-51 P-51 Mustang units arrived in England in December of 1943. They were immediately committed to fighter operations, escorting bombers. The effect was dramatic. Bomber losses began declining. German fighters could no longer attack with impunity. When they attacked a bomber formation, American fighters appeared. Luftwaffe pilots learned that pressing an attack on a bomber meant probably getting shot down by a P-51. The calculus of air combat changed. The strategic bombing campaign, which had been on the verge of collapse due to unsustainable losses, suddenly became viable. American bombers could now strike targets inside Germany with fighter protection. The bombing campaign continued. German industry began experiencing massive damage. The combat record of the P-51 was extraordinary. Between 1944 and 1945, P-51 Mustang pilots shot down 4,950 German aircraft. That represented more than half of all aircraft destroyed by American fighters in the European theater. The 354th Fighter Group, one of the first P-51 units in Europe, achieved 664 confirmed aerial victories. The 357th Fighter Group had 565 confirmed aerial victories. These numbers were staggering. These were fighter pilots, many of them only 20 or 21 years old, flying aircraft they had only trained in for a few months, yet they were achieving victory totals that would have been unimaginable. Major George Preddy was the top-scoring P-51 ace. He achieved 26.83 confirmed victories, most of them in a Mustang. On one mission in July 1944, Preddy shot down 6 German aircraft in a single day. On another mission, he shot down 5 German aircraft. These were not easy victories. These were accomplished against experienced German pilots flying in superior German defensive positions. Lieutenant Bud Anderson achieved 16 confirmed kills. Captain Richard Peterson achieved 15 confirmed kills. These pilots were the best America had to offer. The Mustang gave them the capability to dominate. The Mustang's kill-to-loss ratio was approximately 3.6 to 1 in aerial combat. That meant for every Mustang shot down by a German fighter, American pilots shot down 3.6 German fighters. Some sources cite a kill-to-loss ratio as high as 11 to 1. Either way, the Mustang was devastating German fighter strength. German pilot training had deteriorated as experienced pilots were killed in combat. The Luftwaffe could not produce replacement pilots fast enough. By 1945, German fighter units were being led by pilots with minimal combat experience. American replacement pilots were far more experienced and better trained. The advantage was compounding. German fighter strength declined from 1,600 operational aircraft in January 1944 to just 325 by April 1945. An often overlooked aspect of P-51 operations was the role of the 332nd Fighter Group. This unit was composed entirely of African-American pilots trained at Tuskegee Air Base in Alabama. The 332nd Fighter Group became known as the Red Tails because of the distinctive red paint on their aircraft tail and wings. Flying P-51 Mustangs, the Red Tails completed over 15,000 combat sorties. They escorted bombers on dangerous missions into the heart of Germany. They flew fighter sweeps, searching for German aircraft to destroy. Bomber crews specifically requested the 332nd as their escort, because these pilots had an exceptional record protecting bombers. The Red Tails never lost a single bomber they were escorting to enemy fighters. That is documented fact across thousands of bomber escort missions. That statistic alone speaks to the professional excellence of these pilots and the capability of the P-51 Mustang. These pilots faced the same German fighters as other American pilots. They flew the same aircraft. They achieved the same victories. Yet they face discrimination back in the United States. That contradiction is important to understand and remember. The technological advantages of the P-51 were significant. The aircraft had a bubble canopy providing 360-degree visibility to the pilot. German fighters had flat windscreens that blocked rear and side vision. American pilots could see German fighters attempting to maneuver behind them. The P-51 had a superior rate of climb compared to most German fighters. If a P-51 was attacked from above, the pilot could climb away. The aircraft could sustain high G forces during combat maneuvers. The aircraft had reliable systems. Pilots trusted the aircraft. By the middle of 1944, the air war in Europe was changing fundamentally. American fighter units were no longer primarily focused on escort missions. They were conducting offensive fighter sweeps deep into German territory, specifically searching for German fighters to destroy. P-51s were strafing German airfields, attacking aircraft on the ground, destroying German fighter strength before it could even become airborne. P-51s were attacking German convoys, trains, and truck columns. The aircraft was proving to be incredibly versatile. It could perform air-to-air combat. It could escort bombers. It could attack ground targets. It could carry bombs. It was a fighter bomber. It was a reconnaissance aircraft. It was everything the American Air Force needed. By 1945, the Luftwaffe had effectively ceased to exist as a fighting force. German cities were being bombed daily by American bombers. German fighters no longer had fuel for combat operations. German pilots were being sacrificed in hopeless defensive missions. P-51 Mustangs were flying low-level attack missions supporting ground forces. They were participating in the close air support role. The war in Europe was essentially decided by air power, and the P-51 had played a critical role in that victory. After World War II ended in May 1945, the military initially considered retiring the P-51. The jet age was dawning. The future belonged to jet-powered fighters. But history had other plans. In 1950, North Korea invaded South Korea. The United States responded militarily. American fighter units were deployed to Korea. American Air Force planners expected to face Soviet-supplied aircraft and pilots. What they did not expect was that they would be flying piston-powered P-51 Mustangs against jet-powered Soviet MiG-15 fighters. The aircraft had been redesignated the F-51 by the Air Force. The specifications had not changed. The aircraft was now over 8 years old. In Korea, the F-51 Mustang proved that good design transcends technological generations. American pilots flying F-51s could engage and defeat MiG-15 jets in certain scenarios. The maneuverability of a Mustang allowed it to outturn the MiG-15 in certain flight regimes. American pilots, many of them Korean War veterans and not World War II veterans, learned to use the Mustang's advantages against the MiG-15's advantages. When the Korean War ended, military leaders recognized that piston-powered fighters were becoming obsolete. The jet age was here, but the Mustang had proven itself for another war. The P-51 Mustang served in the air forces of more than 55 nations. Some nations operated the aircraft into the 1980s. The Dominican Republic Air Force retained F-51s in their inventory until 1984. Think about that historically. An aircraft designed in 1941 and produced during World War II was still being flown as a military aircraft 43 years later. That speaks to the quality of the original design. Today, restored P-51 Mustangs fly at air shows around the world. Restoration organizations and warbird enthusiasts have invested millions of dollars in returning these aircraft to original condition. When a P-51 flies, crowds gather. Thousands of people stop to watch. The sound of the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine is distinctive and thrilling. Veterans who flew combat missions in Mustangs, many now in their late 80s or 90s, often cry when they see a restored P-51 fly. These aircraft kept them alive. These aircraft allowed them to come home. These aircraft gave them the opportunity to have families and careers and lives. The P-51 Mustang changed the course of World War II. Without the P-51, the strategic bombing campaign would have failed. American bomber losses would have been unsustainable. The invasion of Normandy would have looked completely different. American air superiority might not have been established. The war in Europe might have lasted years longer. One aircraft, one design decision, one engine modification. These changed history. Modern military strategists study the P-51 because it demonstrates fundamental principles of aircraft design and tactical application. The aircraft succeeded not because it was the most advanced fighter of its era. It succeeded because it was reliable, well-armed, had exceptional range, and was flown by well-trained pilots committed to the mission. The P-51 turned the air war in Europe in favor of the Allies. The P-51 Mustang was perhaps the single most important fighter aircraft of World War II. It was the aircraft that saved the strategic bombing campaign. It was the aircraft that allowed American air superiority to be established. It was the aircraft that helped win the war.